All right, let's get started. Thank you all for being here. This is Getting Started with Apex. You've seen this slide. You love this slide. It's the forward-looking statement. Say it with me, y'all. Salesforce is a publicly traded company. You should only make purchasing decisions based on currently available features and no forward-looking statements that I make during this presentation. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to everyone who's watching on Salesforce Plus. Now, my name is Charles Watkins, and I'm a lead developer advocate at Salesforce. And most importantly, I'm a self-taught software developer. So if you're a business user, you're an admin, you're someone who wants to learn something new, I've been where you are. And I know what you're going through. And if you have any questions of how I got from where I was to where I am, I'll be hanging outside of the presentation. So here's our game plan. We are going to talk about the Apex language, what it is, how it's used, why you want to use it. We're going to talk about testing, which is incredibly important for the Apex language. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about tooling so that you can get started with Apex and you can write some Apex and you can run some Apex. Does that sound good? Cool. So, as you know, Salesforce is a platform for all kinds of builders. On one side, we have click-driven automations and UI builders like Flow and our app builders. And then on the other side, we have our pro code solutions like Lightning Web Components for building interactive UIs, as well as Apex, which is going to be the focus of our discussion today, okay? So let's zoom in on Apex. What is it? Apex is a server-side, object-oriented, strongly typed, case-insensitive programming language. Let me break that down for y'all. Server-side means that it runs in the cloud, not your computer. Object-oriented means that it's organized around data, and that data has attributes and behavior. Strongly typed means that when you create some data in Apex, you must say what type of data it holds and what type of behaviors it has. And case insensitive is mostly just means that Apex doesn't distinguish between upper and lowercase characters. That's weird. Server-side, object-oriented, and strongly typed, Java is that. C++ is that. Rust is that. TypeScript is that. But case insensitive, I haven't run into any other case insensitive languages. That's specific to Apex as far as I know. So, where do we use Apex? This is the reason you're here. Apex is used throughout the entire Salesforce platform. You can use it to extend your Agentforce agents with custom actions. You can use it to provide data to your Lightning Web Components. We got any Flow users here? All right, if you ever run into a Flow and you're like, oh man, I need to manipulate some data. This is really hard or impossible. You can build a custom Apex element to solve that problem. You can use it to update records based on changes. You can use it to connect with third-party services via REST and SOAP endpoints. You can use it to process thousands and thousands of records in a performant manner through batch Apex. And you can use it to have scheduled automations that trigger at a particular time through scheduled Apex. So if you learn how to use Apex, you will basically have superpowers, okay? Now, I said that Apex is a strongly typed programming language, which means that everything's got to type. Has anyone ever made a flow? A variable on the flow? I see a lot of hands. Okay, what's the first thing you have to do when you make a variable? Well, probably the first thing is to give it a name. But the second thing to do is to determine what type of data it holds. Apex works the same way. So you have all the different data types you'd expect. You got number types, integers and decimals. You got text types. In programming languages, text types are called strings instead of text. Don't know why. You got temporal types. Those are your dates, your times, or if you're feeling frisky, your date times. And then you have your other types. You have Booleans, you got blobs, And then you have objects, which are complex types that include the other types. So if you've ever programmed, all of this carries on over to any programming language, right? But let me tell you what type is different. S object types. Can anyone guess what the S stands for? Salesforce. Salesforce objects. We haven't changed it to A objects, Agentforce objects. Oh, I'm kidding. Okay. So in Apex, all of your records are going to be represented using their API name. And in Apex, the API name is just what you generally call the object. So if you want to do something with an account in your code, you're going to say that it's an account because, again, Apex is strongly typed, right? So if you look at this code here, you have the type, account, you have the variable name, ACCT, and then to create the new type, you just say equals new, the type name, and some parens, and a semicolon. In Apex, you end every statement, every sentence, basically, with a semicolon. It's like you've completed your thought. Okay? So in this code, we're creating our variable, and then all of these objects have fields, right? So if you want to update or set a field, you just have the variable name, dot the field, and then you set the value. Not too bad. Now, if you look at that bottom line, you'll see that that field has a suffix, underscore, underscore C. In Salesforce, all custom objects and custom fields end with the underscore, underscore C suffix. I want you to remember that because one day you're going to be writing some Apex and it's going to error. You're going to be like, what's going wrong? And it's because you forgot the underscore, underscore C. I know because I've done it so many times. I still do it. Okay. So, as you may know, Salesforce is a database. It's a database that's been exposed to gamma radiation and it has superpowers. But at the end of the day, it's still a database. And so it's really important to be able to interact with your Salesforce objects and your Salesforce records. Now, when it comes to interacting with data, there's, broadly speaking, two types of things. There's mutating data, which is creating, updating, and deleting data, and writing data, reading data. So when it comes to mutating data, you have one option, DML, the data manipulation language. And it's really simple. In your code, you're going to have some statement where you create an account or you retrieve an account or some other object or record. You set your fields. And in order to make the data actually persist inside of Salesforce, you use DML to create a transaction, an update, or create that record. So that insert account creates an account. If we wanted to delete it, we'd say delete account. If we wanted to upsert it, we'd say upsert, right? And if we wanted to update it, we'd have update account. It's really, really simple, but very, very powerful. Now, what about reading data? Okay. Now, to read data, you have two options. Has anyone heard of SOCL? Okay, so SOCL is super powerful. SOCL is how you retrieve your records from Salesforce. And if you've ever used a language called SQL, it's very, very similar. You can almost read it like human language. So if we look at that SOCL there, we're retrieving a list of accounts. And it just says, give me the ID, the name, from the accounts object, where the name is like sample. So it contains sample. It starts with sample. And that would pull every account that starts with the word sample. The other option is SOCL, the Salesforce Object Search Language. Why would you want to use that? Well, if you need to retrieve multiple different types of records and you want to search on a field, SOCL allows you to do that. Now, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I think it's, like April? I've written tons of SOCL. I haven't touched SOCL this year. So if you have to learn one, learn SOCL. It's very, very useful. okay? It's very, very useful in a vacuum. It's just incredibly useful. Okay. Another thing that you'll want to do, besides just, creating data and updating data and deleting data and retrieving data, is reacting to state changes in the Salesforce platform, right? A really, really common use case is I want to do something when a record's been updated. Now, if you use a flow, you can use record-triggered flows. Well, Apex has the exact same thing, and it works the same way. You determine which object you want to have triggers for. So in this case, it's a contact, and that could be a custom object. It could be a standard object, doesn't matter. Then you determine the operation. So is this happening when a record is being created? Is it happening when a record is being updated or deleted or undeleted? And then you decide at what point in the deletion do you want your logic to run? Do you want your trigger, your automation to happen before the record is inserted? After the record is inserted? And so with triggers, you have that control. And you can build truly powerful automations with Apex triggers. Now, when you actually write them, they won't necessarily look like this. I have the code in the trigger, but in real life, you don't generally write the code in the trigger, you extract it out. Something for the future. Okay? All right. So, something else that's really, really important. Security. So, why does anyone pick Salesforce over a normal database? For the platform features, for the security. If you build your own application by yourself, you have to figure out a way to make sure that every user only sees the data that they have access to. But with Salesforce, you only have to use what are called sharing keywords. So you give people permission to a record, and then in order to ensure that they only see that information through Apex, you use sharing keywords. So here's what they look like. And maybe take a picture of this slide, because this is pretty useful. This separates the good from the greats, right? Within Apex, you have with sharing, which says this piece of Apex code, this is going to run in the user context based on what access the user has, right? And then with the SOCWL, when you're retrieving data, you use with user. So it's not going to retrieve all the records, just the records that the user has access to. And then similarly, right, because you have the execution layer, the code layer, you have the data retrieval layer with SOCWL, right? You need one for controlling access for updating data. And so when it comes to DML, you have as user, okay? And so sharing keywords are incredibly important because they are what's going to allow you to essentially have code that runs in the way that it respects user permissions. The other thing you're going to have to really consider are governor limits. Has anyone here run into a governor limit before? Yeah, you have. It's a great experience. So what are governor limits? Well, Salesforce runs on shared infrastructure, right? And does anybody live with someone else? I don't know if you have a small water heater and they take a really long shower and now you have to take a cold shower, right? Salesforce works the same way. We want to make sure that no one's hogging all the resources. So we have this thing called governor limits. So when you write your code, it needs to be performant so that there's hot water for everybody else, right? And whenever you run some Apex code, it will tell you your usage, so you have an idea of where you are. Now, you'll naturally learn about governor limits by running headfirst into them, right? But it's something to consider when you build on Salesforce that you might not have to consider when you build elsewhere, okay? Now, when you've written your code and you're respecting your governor limits and you're respecting your user permissions, you're still not done. You have to test. Now, if you build your own applications off platform, you don't have to test. But with Salesforce, you have to have test coverage for 75% of your code. Now, quality over quantity. It's better to have 75% good tests than 100% bad tests, right? And the way the test works is you create some test data. Like let's say you have a function and it just adds two numbers. So you might have some data where you have a variable that's 2 and another one that's 2. And then you run your code where your code supposedly adds the numbers together. And then you assert that it has a value you expect. So it's 2 plus 2, it's 4. So you just make sure the output is 4. And that's essentially all testing code is. You create some fake data, you run your code, you make sure that the data becomes what you think it should be after it comes out of your code, okay? Now, unfortunately, you are going to make mistakes, and your code won't run as expected. You're going to need to debug it. Luckily, you have options for that. If you're an ISV, we have a paid add-on that allows you to debug interactively. But if you're not an ISV like me, you can use the free Apex Replay Debugger. It basically takes the logs that are generated and then lets you run it back so that you can see all of the different contexts as it happened, how the variables updated and all that good stuff. And it's well integrated into the Agentforce Vibes IDE as well as Visual Studio Code. Okay. So, where do you write your code? In Salesforce, there's a thing called the Developer Console. Do not use the Developer Console, guys. We can't deprecate it, I guess, but don't use it. It's still there, but don't touch it. Here's what I want you to do. Use Visual Studio Code, which is a free program that you can download right now, or use the Agentforce Vibes IDE. Now, y'all might not know this, but this was announced yesterday. Developer editions are going to get the Agentforce Vibes IDE for free, which means that you can go into a developer edition, click on Setup, and it'll spin up a nice web version, a nice web IDE that you can program against and learn how to code. Super useful. Super, super useful. Okay, so let's take a quick look. All right, so let's wrap things up. So, let's talk about resources. How do you get started? Well, I have a QR code here, and it'll take you to the page that you see here, where you can get started with Apex with some of my favorite resources. So, there's that developer edition org that I talked about that you can use for free. It has the Agentforce Vibes IDE. There's a Trailhead course that's really, really useful. I used it when I was learning. I'm 98% done. I'll get the other 2% at some point. There's Apex recipes from my team. There's Getting Started with Apex. It's a collection of YouTube videos from my team, the developer advocacy team. And another shout out, there's a community resource called Camp Apex, which is also really, really great. I have that linked as well. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. I hope you have a great rest of your TDX. Thank you so much.